Friends, and welcome to my today's lecture that is on Mr. Ramsay's character in Virginia Woolf's novel To the Lighthouse. Now, in my last lecture, friends, I had discussed about Mrs. Ramsay's character sketch in detail. Today, I'll be talking about Mr. Ramsay's character. Friends, in the novel To the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf illustrates Mr. Ramsay as a husband of Mrs. Ramsay and a father of 8 children. We see that he mentally abuses his wife, Mrs. Ramsay, and as a father, he psychologically abuses his children to the extent that his children start hating him. Now, if we compare or if we view Mr. Ramsay's character in comparison to Mrs. Ramsay's, we find Mr. Ramsay standing quite opposite to her, and in many respects too. Whereas we see that Mrs. Ramsay, she acts patiently, kindly, and diplomatically towards others. But he tends to be short-tempered, selfish, and rude. He is also described as, in the novel, in quotes, lean as a knife, narrow as a blade of one, which conjures his physical presence as well as suggests the sharpness or violence of his personality. Now we find him throughout the play trying to seek out the comforts and assurances of women or imploring them for sympathy. He does so even with his guests. Now he is quite uncertain about his work and its legacy, and that insecurity of his is manifested either as a weapon or as a weakness. Now, Mr. Ramsay is quite aware of the inevitability of death, and he bullies his wife into declaring her love for him. Now, this awareness also forces him to confront his own mortality and face the fact that he also might sink into forgetfulness someday. Now, there are many qualities that are attributed to Mr. Ramsay, both negative as well as positive, by different people. But there are certain common ones which most of us would attribute them to or give them to Mr. Ramsay. Now, a brilliant intellectual is one of the major qualities of Mr. Ramsay. He is an erudite scholar, as has been depicted in the novel, an eminent intellectual. Now, just at the age of 25, we see that he had made a definite contribution to philosophy in one little book. So he had already established himself as one of the leading literary figures of his time. And he also had a number of books to his credit. But at the advanced age, he seems to be a spent-up force. And as William Bankes had remarked, that in quotes, Ramsay is one of those men who do their best work before they are 40, unquote. Now, so the books that followed his first one were merely amplifications and repetitions, but still he was an authority on Locke, Hume, and Beckley. And he often got invitations from the universities to talk on various topics of philosophy. Howsoever he may have been, but he has been accepted as an outstanding thinker and a philosopher of his time. Now, another quality, or rather the characteristic that is mentioned, is sense of failure. In spite of his great success in the realm of literature and philosophy, we see that Mr. Ramsay is dogged by a sense of failure. He feels that he could have done much better than what he did, and this thought saddens him, and he tries to rationalize his actions somehow. He actually wishes to achieve perfection, which is not every man's cup of tea. So he reasons out, saying that he actually did work hard, honestly, and he tried to contribute to the best of his abilities. He feels depressed too, thinking that his fame and name may not last long. And the very next moment, he consoles himself by his own arguments. Then we also see that he has an insatiable or unquenchable hunger for sympathy. Now, the sense of failure, fear for transitoriness or temporariness of his name and fame in this world, it engenders in Mr. Ramsay an insatiable hunger for sympathy. Now, he begs for sympathy even from Lily, leaving aside from his wife, whose sympathy he craves every now and then. She tries to arouse confidence. His wife, that is Mrs. Ramsay, she tries to arouse confidence in him as she has great admiration for him and faith in his genius, and sincerely offers him the sympathy and assurance that he needs so badly. But his clinging nature many times puts her in a very embarrassing situation. Now, another quality that he has been attributed to as a stern realist. Now, in the very beginning of the novel, we get to know of the stern aspect of his character when he very curtly he refuses James to take him to the lighthouse the next day, as the weather would not be fine, and in a way he dashes all the hopes of James to the ground. Now, Mr. Ramsay, he cherishes no false notions and illusions about life, and he hopes the same for his children, so that they are able to face the world more squarely. And when Mrs. Ramsay tries to raise some false hopes in the hearts of children regarding weather, he gets extremely upset and irritated and behaves very rudely with her. So we see that in pursuing truth or in the pursuit of truth, he usually he negates people's emotions and feelings. Now he has his own egoism and despotism also, and we all know that Mr. Ramsay, while reading through the novel, we would all come to know that he does only what he wishes, and that is all because of his ego and his egoism. It leads to his despotism, and he does not consider the pleasure and convenience of any other person as far as he thinks that he's always correct. So we always find Mr. Ramsay commanding the children and acting as a despot, which is resented by the children. To the children, he's a ruthless tyrant and trampling their sentiments and sensibilities. And we also see that since he initially, I told you that he psychologically abuses his children to the extent that his children start hating him. And what we find is that at times he even uses such a language which would hurt the other people's emotions and which would depict or exhibit him as a heartless person. And it feels as if he loves to torture or torment other people. But things at times are a little different. He appears to be as a ruthless tyrant who's trampling their sentiments and sensibilities. But that is not all about Mr. Ramsay. He also has a brighter side to his life, and he's a complex character, we can say, with both the dark as well as the brighter shade. And we find that in spite of all his weaknesses and eccentricities and comic ways of expecting sympathy from the others, we also have his glimpses of brighter and humane aspects of his character. He is also affectionate and has tender feelings in him. And what happens is, we see that he's full of compassion and love for his family. Though Wolf describes Mr. Ramsay as insensitive, malicious, and brutal towards his family, but he also wants happiness and the best for his family. Many a times we see in the novel that he scolds his wife and mentally tortures or abuses, but all he wants is love and affection from her, and he does what he wishes. And but even after working according to his wishes, at times he does realize later on that he shouldn't have said certain things, and he even regrets getting upset with his wife without any reason, and also feels ashamed of his own actions. Now, once he hurts his wife, he even tries to and wishes to somehow repay it rather, or by making her happy again. And even though he uses a bad language, or we feel that he has been torturing or tormenting the others, but he is not all that bad, or that he has nothing good in him. He has certain positive traits in his personality or in his character of sincerity and sensitivity towards his family, and he loved and cared for his family, for his wife and family, and though he's very harsh and critical towards his children, we know, and he does speak the truth bluntly, but that's because he wants his children to know the reality of life, and that facts are uncompromising, and it needs courage, truth, and power to endure. And that is, he actually wants the best for his children, and if he also feels that in spite of doing all that he wishes for his children and doing the best, his children, but they fail to understand his good intentions, and they hate being around him, around their father. And Wolf actually does not term him as a good or bad character, but describes him as a real human or a real person with certain flaws in his personality. Now, by reading through Wolf's portrayal, the reader is able to understand the individual as a whole and not just as a fictitious character. And we see that Mr. Ramsay, he shows his tenderness and humility when he finds Mrs. Ramsay fully absorbed in her lonely thoughts, and in quotes, it saddened him, and her remoteness pained him, and he felt as he passed that he could not protect her. He could do nothing to help her. Unquote. Now he wishes to protect them and winds back calm while sailing in the boat towards the lighthouse. And in this very boat, he praises James wholeheartedly for steering them like a born sailor, and his loving heart brings both father and son together by ending their old enmity and deep seated hatred between them. Now, we've discussed a lot about the characteristics, or rather the character analysis of Mr. Ramsay. I'll be coming up with the character sketches of more characters in the novel To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Till then, goodbye, and thank you, friends.